Hello everyone. Today we are going to change the carburetor on a GCV160 Honda engine. And so what is the first thing we do? Well, we go to publications, power equipment, honda.com and buy a shop manual. So they haven't been charging me shipping, and after sales tax it comes to just over $40 for me. So in addition to spending the 40 bucks and getting a manual, yeah, Honda has these free downloads. They have this write-up on avoiding fuel-related problems, talks about ethanol and what you need to do to avoid problems with that. It's a good read. I just printed it on both sides of one sheet. It has the carburetor check sheet, which I should have kept my original carburetor. Downloaded this check sheet, bought a new needle, because it turns out that was the problem. So I could have purchased a new needle, and then that would have saved me, buying all these carburetors and manuals and everything. Then there's also a Honda charging system troubleshooting guide. That's also one of the other free downloads. So anyway, it's an option for you. Also, I had a mid-range RPM problem on my Gravely. Now that's a Kawasaki engine, which is a Walboro 26B, but it explained my mid-range problem that I was having. I ended up having to put it in a sonic cleaner to get it clean, because the newer carburetors, really don't have all these adjustments on them. I mean, you can adjust the idle, but that's about it. Alright, so did I explain step 1? Get a shop manual. Step 2, read the shop manual. Carburetor removal is in section 3, which is maintenance. So we'll do that. But wait, I just want to be a shade tree mechanic and fix the mower. You haven't even touched the mower yet. Alright, well, we'll go on Amazing's website and we'll just buy a carburetor. Well, what do we have? We have a GCV160. For the GCV160, look at all those carburetors listed. Oh my gosh. And if you go onto Amazing's website, they'll list like a whole pile of them and say, oh, this one carburetor, it replaces all of these. Well, I've got some news for you. It doesn't. And why doesn't it? Because you have manual throttle control, ARCS fixed throttle flywheel brake control, ACS auto choke system, without control base type. Oh, this is the 190s. I'm just talking about the 160s. So don't get the 190s confused with the 160s. They're completely different. So this has auto throttle, auto choke. So you got to be careful there. So just buying a carburetor and throwing it on there is not going to solve your problem. And how did I learn that? Because I bought one that had the manual choke. The auto throttle still worked because that's a function of the governor, which is right here. And I'll explain that when I take the carburetor off and put it on. But I'm also going to replace the bowl, because this is the bowl that was on my original carburetor that I should have kept and fixed. But anyway, I'm going to swap the bowl out. You'll see that in the video. And now let's make the special tool. So as you can see, I bought a carburetor with this float bowl on it, and there's a reason for that, but I won't go into it right now. And this was the original OEM float bowl. It had the drain valve on it, the drain bolt on it, excuse me. So I'm just going to swap those out. So, and you can see in this particular picture, it just shows that either one can be swapped out for the other. So it doesn't show the special tool, but on the other three carburetor types it does show the special tool, which Honda now tells you just to make it. But anyway, it's a 6mm by 83 millimeters long, so it's a 6 by 1 millimeter by 83 millimeter. They also give you a part number, but I don't think that's available anymore. It's just make your own, which we're going to do. And this one also 683, 683, and then on the 190 they're telling you to make a 685. See, the carburetor is slightly different. The special tool that you make is going to be a little bit longer. Okay, so I plan on making my special tool. Here is my M6 by 1. The hex key for this is 4 millimeters, so that should give me enough clearance where I can still use the key and cut off the head. So the instructions from Honda is just, you know, take your hacksaw and cut this off. Also, I made this longer. This is 100 millimeters. Okay, there's my setup. Let's see if the camera's in the way, and I'll start making chips. Almost there. Still have to make some adjustments because of the tight squeeze here with at least my particular tooling. So just keep adjusting and making chips. Alright, let's see what we got. Alright, so I'm saying we are good. Definitely goes in and out of the 6 millimeter mark on the calipers. Hopefully I was in camera. So with our carburetor, we can also see that we are good to go. Okay, I have my two studs cut down with an Allen for an emergency escape. I thought about knurling it, but it's a bit rough. By that I mean this metal is very hard and I really had trouble knurling it, so I just made two. Have the backup Allen key. I figured I could put some pliers on it if I really screw up and lock it into the machine, which I doubt. Okay, we're finally ready to get started, but let me show you what we do in industry. Little tech tip here. Put on cotton gloves, and whether it's summertime or wintertime, it does not matter. All the time. You put on your cotton gloves, and then your vinyl or nitrile, everybody's nitrile now, just slides right on, no problem. And this also helps if it is summertime, well actually sometimes in the winter, if you're sweating, the sweat does not come pouring out of the glove. Okay, I think we're finally ready to do some physical work. Alright, step one, fuel off. Alright, we'll take the cover off, which includes the air filter. Alright, step one says to remove this screw right here, if I can. Alright. Then it says to remove one of the carburetor screws, the long one. And it says to insert our special tool. Also, oops, wrong end. I rounded the tip a little bit so it wasn't square, so it would get a grip. Then it says to push on the cover and remove the other screw. Then we install our other special tool. Let's see if it goes in. I can look over to the side here and see it going in correctly. Yeah, this one's super easy to go in by hand. Okay. Sorry about that goof up, but I'm leaving it in. Alright, then it says to take off the cover. Also, it might pop off for two reasons. One, the wire, the kill switch wire is attached to it. I'll show you that. And then also the breather hose, crankcase breather hose is also attached to it. So, where is our... Okay. Let's see. There we go. I have it on the silver. That little piece of plastic that's hanging over, see the silver between it, between the bottom and the flat, the wire gets tucked in there, and that is very important. Don't forget about that. And of course the breather hose goes here, and that breather hose is really interesting. Let me show you something if it's still on this one. There are two ends. Yep. And one end has a white dot on it. And you insert the hose all the way up to the white dot into the crankcase here. So when you insert it back in, all the way to the white dot. Alright, also it's good to have a box or container or tray or something to keep everything organized, keep all your parts together. They have a tendency to want to run away, so you want to capture them, keep them in a safe place. Okay, it's very important to trim off the extra gasket material that's squished out when they assembled it. Just kidding. I'm just anal. So I'm going to clean this up. Alright, more better. Let's put the carburetor on. Step 1, remove the governor. Yeah, I'm going to put it on a little bit different than what the book says, because I think the way I do it is more better. Also, that provides me the golden opportunity to show you how to reset the governor. Also, make sure your pin is on correctly. See how the flat part is up top and the little crimped hook part is on the bottom? That's what the book calls for. Step 1, insert your special tool. That's your M6x1 bolts. I used 100mm and cut off the heads. Okay, the first parts that go on to the cylinder head here is the carburetor insulator. And this gasket is called the insulator packing. And the one corner, you can see, is not cut off. See how this is like cut off and this is left there? Well, if you look on the back of your insulator, what you will see is, if I can see these little tabs here, it will not go on incorrectly, or it'll damage the insulator if you put it on incorrectly. The rag is hiding my auto choke. Many of these carburetors do not have auto choke. So anyway, I'm showing, see, it'll interfere right here, or it'll interfere right here if you don't put it on correctly. So the large tab goes in the lower right hand corner, so we'll put that on. Maybe. Alright. Let me just walk it back here without damaging it. There we go. Alright, and then we'll put on our insulator. Notice there's a square side and a round side. So this is my auto choke up here. Don't worry about that. We'll put on the insulator next. Notice that that is not a through hole, but notice the gasket shape and how it goes on there. I didn't remove it. And what is that called? An air guide. So this gasket right here is called an air guide, and this will all go back. See how this piece back here on the auto choke tucked in behind the valve cover. So that went in there like that. Then next is your air guide gasket, but note, even though it has a hole, that's really an alignment hole, not an air passage hole. Next is your air guide. And notice the hole right here. It's going to line up with this hole right here, which is a dead end. So your air guide is going to go on there. Alright, and then next is your air guide gasket. And if it's in good shape, you can see the indentations, and you can then see how it goes on and reinsert it appropriately. Alright, next I like to hook up the governor. It's because everything still has a little bit of freedom of movement. We can play around with it. So let's go ahead and do that. So the governor has a long and a short end, as designated by this little kink right here. This is the long end, and the part going to the carburetor is the short end. On your throttle return spring, I'm holding the coil part of the spring. There is a long end and a short end. And the short end of the spring goes to the long end of the governor rod. So I'll just feed the coil into the long end, and then the long end of the spring going to the short end of the governor rod will look like that. And now I'll hook up the spring and the governor rod to the carburetor. Alright, on the carburetor's throttle actuation plate there are two holes. The outside hole is slightly smaller than the inside hole, and the outside hole with the smaller one gets the spring, and the inside hole gets the governor arm, like that. Now we can slide our carburetor back on. That's hooked up. Out of the way. Alright, let's hook up the governor arm. Notice the governor arm bolt needs to go on there correctly. It's kind of locked in place there. Now the top hole and the bottom hole. Again, a large hole and a small hole. Small hole, throttle return spring. Large hole, governor control rod. Again, I like to put on the spring first only because for me that keeps me from bending the crap out of it. See how nice and easy that went on? Then we'll just maneuver it into position here. Make sure we're clear. Get it on. And then we'll do, at a later time, we'll do our full, clockwise rotation for the arm and clockwise rotation for the governor before locking it down. Okay, while I can still see everything, I want to make sure that my kill switch wire is out of the way, that later on that gets hooked up to our air cleaner. So I want to make sure that's out of the way, it doesn't get pinched by anything, the governor rod, carburetor, whatever. So I have the carburetor pushed back. Next is the carburetor gasket. Sorry, they're calling that the carburetor packing. Then we're going to put on our control plate. And now's a good time to make sure that the fuel line is hooked up. So let me do the fuel line first. So typically you do not remove this, but since I'm replacing it, I'm going to install new fuel line. You want to put it all the way on and get your clip on there correctly. Alright, let me get my fuel line on there. Correctly. Get my clip on there correctly. It's more difficult with gloves. Here we go. Also, I have the adjustment levers, whatever you want to call them, down at the bottom. I don't want them facing forward. I could have them facing back, but I have them down at the bottom because I don't want it to collide with anything like my control plate, which I am now going to install. Now if you had a choke, you would have hooked up the choke before you put on your plate here, because you want everything connected when the plate goes on. Next, I highly recommend your special tools here are that you are able to freely deal with them. That is to say, you only want to start a few threads, because you do not want to have to fight those things, because you got to deal with the gasket staying in place. Alright, next is your air cleaner gasket, and they're calling it packing, air cleaner packing. You want to make sure that goes on there correctly. They say use a new one. And I explained why, I believe, earlier. If I didn't, if I edited out, it's because the torque limiters come through and they actually cut the holes larger. So if you try and reuse it, it'll slop around and not fit where it's supposed to go. Alright, now we're going to insert our crankcase breather tube. It gets inserted all the way up to the mark. There should be a little white mark there. That goes on to the crankcase, goes into the crankcase, and then the large end, notice how that's puckered out, that goes on the air cleaner housing. So we'll put this in, up to the tube. It'll sit right there when we're all done. Now comes a nice little delicate part where we put this all together and set it in place. Alright, you want to make sure your choke, if you have one, is hooked up correctly, your governor arm and throttle return spring is hooked up correctly, and your breather hose is hooked up correctly. Want to make sure everything is hooked up correctly. Now, just from messing around with this thing, what I've found is I really need to push on it, the top and bottom, hold it in place, and then I like to take out the inside tool. I'm calling it just a tool to hold all the gaskets in place and everything. If I take out the outside one, there's a tendency for the gaskets to fall. So let me get this thing. Oh good, I'm recording. I'm really good at not recording when I need to be. Now that it's all snug, if you remove this one, the gaskets should not fall out. I had to unwind it all the way. Let's see how this guy goes in here. Yeah, it went in there pretty good. And now double check, triple check, make sure everything's okay. Show you something. Okay, number one, you got a little peephole here. You can look in here at different angles, make sure your gaskets are all lined up and coordinated. And then your kill switch wire right here, that gets tucked into your air cleaner. Technically it goes underneath here in the back and then clicks into place on that front tab. So it comes up, over, and around that way. Don't forget that. Very important. Alright, the governor and the governor arm. Alright, left brain, right brain, left-handed, right-handed, mechanically inclined, mechanically declined. Alright, how do you explain this? It's not the same for everybody just to say both go clockwise. You know, so you can move this back all the way as far as it'll go. See, forward, back, or if you're thinking at the pivot point, clockwise. So clockwise will be like that because it's wanting to go around clockwise. Then the same thing with the governor shaft here. However you think of it, backwards, towards the back, clockwise, however you want to do it. Just both of them. All the way back, all the way clockwise, however you want to think about it. If I can get a grip on there. All the way back, all the way back. And with everybody all the way back, just snug up the nut. And you're also going to have to check the RPM. Okay, let's put on the governor spring. Goes on the bottom hole or most forward hole or the smaller hole, however you want to think about it. And then it connects up here. Alright, they're saying to decrease speed, bend it back towards the back of the engine, and to increase speed, bend it forward. However, I just read where it said when it's fixed throttle, there is no adjustment. And I thought this was a fixed throttle. What do I know? Alright, the procedure says, you know, put on the governor arm as I described, and, you know, if there's any adjustments, you know, do the bending. They want 3,100 RPM is nominal. They're saying plus or minus 150. So, I always thought 28 was normal. You know, maybe 3,000. I mean, the tools they have for a single cylinder engine to check RPM are pretty lame. So, you know, you're lucky to get any kind of accurate reading to begin with. Alright, make sure my bolts are torqued down. It's at 10 Newton meters. That doesn't seem like much. Anyway, they're good and tight. Almost all back together. Spark plugs! Well, this is news to me. What's that say? NGKBPR5ES. Pressure washer BPR6ES. 5ES 7734. The different ones, you know, are copper and, you know, different tip. You know, might be manufactured out of, you know, something crazy like titanium or something, and that's what these color boxes indicate. You know, you'll see red ones and whatnot like that. You also see fake ones, so be careful where you get them from. So as you can see, I had the 6 in there. There we go. BPR6ES. So I had the 6. So what's the difference between the 5 and the 6? Well, that number right there, that 5. The smaller the number, the hotter the plug. So the 5 is hotter than the 6. Also, it's a good thing I checked this plug. All the plugs I've been buying for automotive applications have been set to the correct specification. But this one was past specifications. I actually had to bend it down closer, make the gap smaller. I brought it down to the 10-20-30 rule. If you know what the 10-20-30 rule is, 10 for the ignition coil, the 20 for the points, but most engines don't have points anymore, and then 30 for the spark plug gap. So typically I run 28. So, but man, this one was like 35. So I had to deal with it. Alright, 13/16 spark plug socket, or 13/16 deep well, or whatever. What makes it a spark plug socket is there's a little boot in there to hold the end, but on most automotive applications it's a pain in the butt because it gets stuck on there. Yes, it was missing when I first showed it. You know, but it's just a real pain in the neck sometimes. It's really not designed well, in my opinion. Alright, they're saying tighten it down. For a new plug, tighten it down till it seats and then a half a turn. If you're reusing the plug, a quarter turn, eighth or a quarter turn. Now what you need to make sure is that the gasket is all the way down, so be careful about that. Also, this is kind of a crush washer, so that kind of makes a difference between new and reused, because that washer is not a flat washer, it will actually crush. So you want to be careful of all that good stuff. I like to make sure all the threads are clean, that it's down there nice and snug. I'll put a visual on there before I actually tighten it. the half a turn that they're recommending. Also, you need to be careful too. There's all kinds of things going on here. If you don't have the little cap thing in there, you're just using a socket, let's say, you want to be careful. Watch when I put it on all the way. See, it won't go in. See, there we go. See how it doesn't go in all the way? So if you press it in all the way on this ratchet, now you're hitting the head of the socket. So just be careful. Make sure you engage the flats fully and correctly, and then do your half a turn. And that is the half a turn. And you want to make sure you hear the boot click on there. I know I didn't hear it either, but I know it's on there. I felt it. I'll hook up my fuel line. Now if you're using OEM, just keep what you have. If you're not using OEM, what you're going to find is these clips are going to be different sizes. So if you have a box of hose clips, you probably find you're going to need a 7 to go from the cutoff valve to the carburetor, those two, and then you're probably going to need a 9 to go from the fuel tank to the shutoff valve. So just a little FYI there. And I like to push these out of the way like that. You know, the Honda one is formed. You know, I have my hose a little bit longer to get a nice gentle curve here. Now we'll put our starter back on. These starters are interesting. They're two different kinds, and what I mean by that is the hole size. Where am I at? The hole size here is different. There's large and small. So if you accidentally buy a small one, you're replacing it, you know, you get 10 bucks on Amazon, they say it'll fit. You put it on your machine, it doesn't fit. You can drill it out, make it bigger. So I wasn't on camera. We'll give them a 6. I wasn't on camera when I put it on. Let's see. Let's try 8. Almost started with 8, but yeah, that's... Yeah, so 6 or 8. You know, it's 10 Newton meters is not that much. Okay, last chance to check everything. Make sure all your bolts are snug, tight. Make sure your wire, your kill switch is routed correctly. Make sure your governor arm is set correctly. You know, just make sure your valve, oh gosh, that is so much easier than the original one. Your valve functions, everything's good. Date your carburetor so you know when you put it in there. I know it's the end of 2021 if you're watching the video. I'm cheating. That's because it's not going to get out and be used until 2022. Some people grease these up actually. Put a little grease around here. I like Vaseline myself, but I typically don't grease them. Although a lot of people do. A lot of people. A lot of mechanics. Because, you know, they don't want to call back. Alright, there we go. Now all we need is some petrol. I didn't touch the oil. Of course, we'll check the oil before we start. That's normal. And that's a carburetor change out. Man, that was unbelievable. Thank you for watching.